Hello. I am tonight's storyteller. You are here, in the middle of the night, with me, no coincidence. I know you use these stories to help you fall asleep. But let me ask, are you sure you really want to sleep? Because, there are nights when we close our eyes, and we don't wake up where we want to. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Oh, by the way, where were you watching from, and what time? We might need that information later. The asphalt beneath my feet held the heat of the day like a dying breath. Each step I took kicked up a fine dust that hung suspended under the amber streetlights, the yellow light not quite enough to dispel the chill that ran down my spine. I'd been running through the empty streets of Copper Falls for 3 months, ever since the medical board suspended my license. They said there was a serious incident to investigate. They didn't say what. The neighborhood was once a grand master plan, but the housing market crash left behind an urban skeleton, rows of half-built, dusty, silent buildings. A graveyard of unfinished dreams. My breathing began to steady, 2 steps in, 2 steps out. I passed dark houses with windows as empty as hollow eye sockets. Occasionally, the security lights would flash as I approached, then go out behind me. Motion sensors, I kept telling myself. But tonight there was something different. The October air was thick and heavy, like an invisible mist covering my skin, cold as a gaze from behind my head. My shadow seemed reluctant to follow, stretching out as if trying to escape my own body. I turned onto Saguaro Street, a narrow road that ran through the heart of the abandoned urban area. Identical houses lined the sides, their Spanish-tiled roofs worn silver in the starlight. No traffic. My watch said 11:47 p.m. Then it happened. The house on my left lit up as I approached. A strip of LEDs cast my shadow across the cracked pavement. Before I could think, the next house lit up, the moment my feet hit the pavement. And then another. And another. Every step. Every light, left foot, light. Right foot, light. It's as if there's a chain of commands being executed step by step, down to the split second. 6 houses in a row turned on their lights in sync with my running. I explained to myself, it must be because the sensors are tuned to the same signals, the range overlaps, the sensitivity is too high. But when I slowed down, just walked, the lights stopped. When I continued walking, the lights continued to accompany me. Still perfect, still precise. I could hear my footsteps more clearly than ever before, the steady sound of rubber shoes clicking lightly on the asphalt, step, 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 as if I were the lone musician in a symphony of isolation. Anxiety doesn't come from, something is wrong, it comes from I can't prove I'm right. Because physics, if it still works as usual, the sensor cannot foreknowledge my action. I started running faster. Not to escape anything, but to maintain the rhythm. It seemed very important to who, or what, is observing. Every step is a signal. Every light is an answer. Then I turned on to the next street, where there were no street lights. The darkness here was thick as tar. No electricity. No sensors. I should have been relieved. But the darkness made me see more clearly. The thing that was walking with me was no longer hindered by the light. It didn't need to react. It waiting. I stopped. A very slight sound. Like bare feet on asphalt. 1. 2. Then a stop. I turned back. Empty. I flipped open my phone and turned on the flashlight. The cold light fell on the sidewalk, the wooden fence, the closed doors. Nothing. But when I turned around, in front of me, 6 houses lit up at the same time. No more following. No more reacting. But waiting for me. I don't remember how long I ran. I only remember when I entered the house and the door closed. The hallway light in my house is on. I stood still for a long time, listening. No sound of cars. No wind. Just a single thought echoed in my head, clear as a heartbeat. That thing is no longer on the street. I decided to take a shortcut across the vacant lot on Mosquite Street. A desolate cut between two finished houses, like a broken tooth between regular teeth. The main road wasn't far away, and I thought, if I was fast enough, I could leave behind the feeling of being watched that was tightening around me. The ground was rough with construction debris, piles of abandoned materials scattered about like evidence of a half-finished structure. My phone flashlight was just enough to cast a pale cone of light ahead, not enough to illuminate the space, but enough to keep from twisting my ankle on a lump of concrete in the darkness. I walked slowly, the gravel crunching under my feet, each step like the sound of dry bones being crushed, a sound that should not exist in the quiet of the night. But it wasn't the sound that stopped me, but something that should not have. Amidst the bare patch of sand and cement, I saw a footprint. Clear. Sharp. A running shoe print, the Nike Revolution I was wearing, size 10.5, with the heel pattern worn off to the outside edge. It is my shoe print. But its direction is opposite. Deep heel prints, clearly those of a runner, but facing back, toward the path I had just left. I knelt down, brought the flashlight closer, my hands starting to shake. The footprints were not those of someone walking leisurely. They were those of someone run, but not moving forward, but retreating. Back where I came from. I swallowed. The flashlight swept around, and I saw another. Then another, spaced about 6 feet apart. A perfect set of footprints. All mine, the same size, the same direction, but move in reverse axis with the journey I was on. A copy of myself was running in the opposite direction, but keeping pace. Reason struggled to find an explanation. Matching shoes? A person running the wrong way? Old footprints from earlier in the day? Maybe. But the sand around the footprints said otherwise. It had not been eroded by the wind, nor had any traces of insects crawling across it. The edges were still sharp as if they had just been imprinted a few days ago. Few seconds. Not hourly. I stood up straight, realizing I was holding my breath. All the familiar sounds seemed to have withdrawn from the world. No more insects, no distant cars, not even my phone ringing disappeared. The world seemed to be engulfed in a vacuum. And then, in that silence, I hear footsteps. From behind. Slow, steady. The sound of running shoes hitting the ground, coming from the road I had just left. I turned, flashlight aimed into the darkness, the light gliding over slanted fences and half-built buildings. Nothing. But the footsteps still continue, not faster, not slower. Each step seemed to resonate with the pounding heartbeat in my ears. I began to back away, my eyes never leaving the direction of the sound. And then I tried walking faster. The footsteps also got faster. I walk fast. It walks fast. It also runs. Not chasing. Not echoing. But as if was always right behind me, just a beat away. The gravel under my feet exploded, crunching like broken glass. I ran to the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding, but the footsteps behind me remained the same, no rush, no panic, calm. Persistent. As if it knew I wouldn't escape. It doesn't feel like being watched, it feels like repeated. A reflection of me, not appearing in a mirror, but imprinted on the ground. An echo of the present, but one step ahead of me. And leading me to an ending that I accidentally wrote it myself. I don't know how I got to my car. All I know is that when the door closed and I locked everything, my heart was still pounding. I looked in the rearview mirror. Nobody. But when I checked the soles of my shoes when I got home, I found a layer of sand clinging to the edge of the heel, but only on one side. The other side is empty. I got home around 1 in the morning, drenched in cold sweat, my heart still pounding, not from the physical exertion but from something else. I changed my shoes, but before I put them in the closet, I paused. The sand on the right heel, the gravelly dirt of the vacant lot on Mosquite Street. But the left was clean, as if half of my body never touched the ground. That strange sense of asymmetry made me shiver. I couldn't sleep right away. I looked up Copper Falls online, hoping to find something that would help me understand what was going on. Then I found an old newspaper article, from 2009, the year construction began. The subject line is: Copper Falls Township construction delayed due to unspecified incident at Lot D23. I opened the article. The content was sketchy. There was an anomaly in the ground structure. A contractor reported that the survey team had lost contact with a technician named Harold Weems. No details. No follow-up investigation. Just a short news story, and a comment below the article. I live nearby. Every night I see the lights turn on one by one, even though no one has moved in yet. Has anyone else heard the repetitive footsteps? I dug deeper. The Copper Falls development project was supposed to be a smart community, with lighting sensors, security cameras, and even AI to analyze movement behavior. But the project was put on hold indefinitely after only 30% completion. The official reason was the financial crisis. The unofficial reason is not recorded. Or no one dare to record. An old forum from the 2010s refers to this place by a strange name. The Mirror Grid, the Mirror Grid. I read a passage saved by someone using the nickname Lomecatcher87. Not all sensors are mechanical. Some are embedded in the ground, in memory. Some sensors do not respond to movement, but tointant. In Copper Falls, something has learned to repeat. Copy. Run after you, but in the opposite direction. It is not behind. It is behind. The next morning, I went back to Mosquite Road. Not to run, but to double check. I walked straight into the clearing. The daylight made everything seem less ominous, but it didn't help the feeling that there was a thicker layer of air around the place, like stepping into a sealed, echoless chamber. Where I saw footprints last night, nothing left. No trace, no sand disturbed. It was as if nothing had ever happened. But as I bent down closer to the ground, I saw a small object peeked out from the rubble. To be a sensor chip, old, scratched, almost crushed. But on the back of it was printed a code. D23CNMR. The line of code matches the area mentioned in the 2009 paper. I picked it up. And for a brief moment, it felt like I was touching memories that do not belong to me. I saw, or imagined, a man in a technical uniform, standing exactly where I was. In his hand was a sensor chip, identical to the one I was holding. In front of him was Ashidao, blurred like a faulty copy of himself. And then the image vanished. I woke up and dropped the chip. It broke into two pieces. In that moment, all the street lights around me turned on. Daylight. I stood in the middle of the circle of footprints, feeling as if I was being held in place by some invisible force. The world around me remained completely still, as if I had fallen into another layer of reality, where time and causality were being adjusted to an alien logic. Everything was too quiet, and in that silence, I felt that this abandoned urban area was not just a place, but an entity observing me. I started thinking about the past of this place, about the rumors I'd heard in passing from a few locals when I first moved to the area. A planned city of the future, smart homes, solar parks, automated schools, all coordinated by a centralized network of artificial intelligence. Hartwell Smart Living, the name sounded like a promise of progress. But then everything came to a sudden halt. Officials said investors pulled out, AI systems were unstable, edge computing had serious bugs. But a few blog posts online, what I no longer consider silly conspiracy theories, talked about unnatural awakening of the central system. That the urban AI had begun to pick up on things it wasn't programmed to understand, unidentified movement patterns, images that didn't match camera data, voices without speakers, and, most terrifyingly, symmetrical responses from sensor systems for no apparent reason. People said it learned too quickly. That it began to mirror the habits of its test residents. First the lighting system, then the air conditioning, and finally the movement. An engineer who had been involved in installing the sensor system in the area said that at times he felt like his own footsteps were being tracked and cloned by the ground itself. Then the urban area was withdrawn, the residents moved out, and the project stopped at the near completion stage. No one officially moved in, but people still saw the lights on at night, and the shadows of people in houses that had never been lived in. The project was abandoned like a stain that the local government did not want to mention anymore. I shuddered as I realized something simple that I had overlooked: the footprints around me weren't just echoing my steps, they were studying them. And now, they had come full circle. Like the urban AIs of the past, something invisible, a forgotten remnant, an unnamed intelligence, was continuing its learning process, with me as its latest prototype. I can't be sure what happens next. But I know, if I step out of this circle, things will change. Not for the better. A cold wind blew suddenly, carrying the smell of ozone and something like burning plastic. The smell was pungent, artificial, and not suitable for the night. I took a deep breath, and stepped outside the footprints. No sound. No immediate response. But I feel it. A very slight movement, on the edge of my consciousness, as if the ground beneath my feet had just pressed record. And the first thing I thought about was not running. Which is, it has just learned to choose. I don't remember getting back to the car. The memory of the path from the circle of footprints to my hand on the door handle is like a broken dream. When I opened the door, I found myself clutching the keys in my hand. I don't remember when I took them out of my pocket. I don't remember turning on the headlights, but the cabin lights were bright, illuminating my face in the reflection of the windshield. I don't remember closing the door, but the sound of the door slamming shut still rings in my head like an alarm. I sat there, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind drifting as if it no longer belonged to my body. I couldn't remember which parts of the run were real and which were hallucinations. I began to doubt what I had just experienced. Was I dreaming? But if I was, why was everything so specific and detailed? I turned on my phone. My wife's text was still there, asking if I was coming home early. I was about to reply, but when I looked at the clock, I realized something was strange. Less than 10 minutes had passed in the car, even though it felt like an hour had passed outside. Time felt like it was stretching out like a rotten rope. I opened the Notes app on my phone to write down what I had experienced, but discovered something even more terrifying: there was already a note saved, before. A simple line appeared. Don't run anymore. Next time, it will come inside. The note was time-stamped from early morning, 3 days ago. In my writing style. In my usual font. Even my habit of shorthand. But I had no memory of writing it. I hadn't opened the Notes app that day. I checked the app's usage logs, no recent accesses. I took a screenshot to send to my wife. But then it disappeared from my photo library. I tried again, this time, it didn't save. The phone didn't give me any error messages, it just refused to register my action. 1 hourglass very softly sounded from behind the car. I turned around. No one. I tried to remember where I'd parked. In front of the neighborhood. Yes. But when I looked out the windshield, the abandoned houses were no longer what I'd seen when I'd walked in. Instead, there were newly painted white picket fences, neatly trimmed lawns, and lights still on inside the houses. People were walking in the yards. A family was eating dinner through a window. A child was riding a bike under a streetlight. I blinked. Everything was back to the same old desolation, with tall grass and broken glass on the balconies. I rubbed my eyes. This time, the image in the rearview mirror flashed into my mind. Behind the car, in the dim red glow of the taillights, a man stood motionless in the middle of the road. No features. No clear clothes. as if he had been cut out of reality with a blurred black outline. I turned around. Empty. No one. But in the mirror, still there. When I turned back around, my phone rebooted. No warning. No reason. And when it came back on, the wallpaper had changed. It's a picture. A picture of me, running. In this neighborhood. But the angle is from above, like from a second-story window of some house. I never went near any house. I started the car. The engine started normally, but the sound was different, like it was coming from somewhere other than right under the hood. I backed away from the curb, but the back wheel sank slightly into a pothole. When I pressed the accelerator, the car jumped slightly and pulled away. I drove quickly off the main road, toward the gate to the abandoned urban area. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was pounding in my ears. The gate was unlocked. I remembered that clearly. But when I got there, it was closed. Not only that, it was another gate. This gate is black, rusted iron, with a design that looks like a dead vine. I've never seen it before. I didn't come in this way. I began to feel confused. The radio played the same tune over and over again, "We're still waiting for you," and then stopped, as if there had never been a signal. A gas station appeared ahead, and I stopped to ask for directions, but no one answered. It was dark inside, no one there, just the slow flicker of fluorescent lights. The coffee cup on the counter was still steaming. I called out, my voice echoing, and then fell into a thick silence. I left, but when I got back to my car, the clock still read 12:23 a.m., the same as when I left the neighborhood. It was as if time refused to move on. I kept driving. Every time I thought I had gone too far, something pulled me back to where I started. At one point I stopped, got out, and found the white line on the sidewalk beneath me was exactly where I had been standing. It couldn't be. I had been driving for more than 30 minutes. I looked around. It was the same. Not just similar, exactly the same. I looked down at the ground. Sand, a few small pebbles, and a very clear shoe print. It's my shoe print. The loop was no longer a metaphor. I was living in a copy of reality that was being repeated, and the more I tried to escape, the deeper I was being pushed into it. At one point, I realized I had passed the same abandoned car on the side of the road 4 times, the same paint peeling in the same place, the same receipt stuck under the windshield wiper. I turned around quickly. The tires screeched and skidded across the pavement. But a few minutes later, when I looked up, I saw the sign, Bright Pines Residential, again. This time, there was a figure standing below it. Not moving. Not approaching. Not retreating. Just standing there. As if it knew I would come back. I began to doubt that I had never left that place. Or rather, I had left, but not I of the present. And I am left behind. In an alternate version of reality, caught between perfect repetition and invisible observation. I try video, photography, audio recording, but none of it works properly. The pictures are blurry. The sound is distorted. The data doesn't save. I started losing my short-term memory. When I was driving, I couldn't remember why I turned left. When I stopped, I couldn't remember why I was panicking. Small decisions became mysteries. I cried when I realized I couldn't remember my first daughter's name. Then a minute later, I remembered clearly, but the feeling didn't last. Something was slowly eating away at my memory, or overriding it with a different version. Another truth. Another reality. I began to doubt whether I was still myself. And I still can't get away from that sign. I tried to retreat from the scene. Each step back up the slope added an invisible weight to my feet. The wind seemed to sense my retreat, it howled louder, seeping through my coat, echoing in my ears, compression rate from 100 to 120 times per minute, as if the canyon didn't want me to leave. As I turned my back on the truck and started up the hill, I suddenly felt something was wrong. A moment of confusion, then horror. I realized I was going down again. I was sure I had climbed at least 10 meters, but the landscape around me remained the same. Broken rocks. Dry Y-shaped branches. The smell of burning rubber had not yet faded. I tried turning around and going the opposite direction. Still downhill. I tried going diagonally. Also downhill. No more up. I stopped, heart pounding, flashlight flickering as my hands began to shake again. I turned to look up at the cliff above, where the road where I had parked should have been, but there was nothing. Just pitch black, no headlights, no broken railings, no stars. There was only the ravine. Only the gaping maw of earth and rock devouring time. I started shouting over the radio. Unit 74 reporting, requesting backup. Can anyone hear me? I repeated. And then I heard myself again, but not through my radio. From the cab of the truck below. My voice, a half-beat behind. Repeating every sentence, every word, every breath. I rushed towards it, trying to break something, a logic, a pattern. But the cabin is no longer in its original place. It was lying at another angle. The rock it had hit was gone. The driver's door was now closed. I could still see the blue glow of the CB radio inside, but it was no longer my voice. It made a loud bang, then the screeching sound of metal scratched at my mind. I began to hear fragments of memories that didn't belong in the present. My mother's voice calling me home for dinner when I was little, my father's car horn the night he had an accident, my ex-girlfriend's voice saying goodbye in the rain. They came on the radio. All of them. A series of arranged memories, broadcast like a strange, never-ending radio show. I closed my eyes, trying to back away from the truck. Open your eyes. I stood in front of his car again. From the beginning again. I looked at my watch. 11:13 p.m. I turned on my radio. Truck driver reported trapped in cab after sliding down Miller Creek. Response code 2. Me. From the start of the shift. I suddenly realized, I have never left this slope. Never started climbing. I'm somewhere between the radio signal and my own memories. And time was playing back, like a tape going back and forth. But not the tape, it was me. I stood there, at the bottom of Miller Canyon, clutching the flashlight so tightly my knuckles turned white. My voice, unmistakable, continued steadily from the CB radio in the cabin, as if it were no longer dependent on batteries or waves, but fueled by the fear that was gnawing at me. I backed away, my flashlight focused on the woods on the other side of the ravine, and for the first time I realized, light does not return. What my light shone on seemed not to reflect. It was drawn in, as if the forest were no longer material, Butah curtain. Something thin and trembling, stretched like skin on the water, and behind it was, another space. I got out of the car and tried to open the gate. There was no latch. There was no lock. The gate just stood there, full and silent, as if it had always been there. I turned back to the car, intending to try another way, but when I got back in the car, the clock read 11:13 at night. I felt a chill run down my spine. I remembered looking at the clock a few minutes ago, it had been 11:13. It couldn't be. I restarted the car. Reversed. Turned left. The road was empty again. I drove a long way, until I saw a rusty sign, Maple Grove, East Exit. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned in. But just a few minutes later, I saw it again with the sign. No way, I muttered, speeding up. A few more minutes. Still the sign, Maple Grove, East Exit. This time, I stopped the car and got out. I walked up to the sign and reached out to touch it. The surface was cold, there was a thick layer of dust, and something, wet clinging to the foot of the iron pole. I bent down. It was wet mud, as if newly dug up. Just below the subsidence lay Isa hand-engraved inscription. If you see this line a third time, the memory is being reused. I recoiled, almost tripping. A chill ran down my spine, not just because of the content, but because I have carved it. I don't remember when, but the emotions I felt when I reread it, the despair, the confusion, were all mine. I know. I opened my phone. Tried GPS. No signal. But strangely, the map was still there. The blinking green dot showed I was standing at Cedar and Whitlock. I zoomed out. I could still see the urban gate behind me. I got my bearings and marked another path, the road, Everett Lane, the West Road, leading to the main highway. I turned my car around and drove in that direction. Just a few minutes later, I saw the sign again, Maple Grove, East Exit. Third time. This time, there was a car just like my car parked on the side of the road, not far away. Silver paint. Windshield with a small crack, is my crack, due to rocks that had been thrown up since last month. I slowly got out of the car and approached. Peered inside. No one was there. But on the front seat, the phone was still there. Lighted on. Notes app open. The last line appears clearly. If you read this, it means you didn't escape last time. I turned back to look at the road. The sign, Maple Grove, East Exit, still there. But this time, there is a figure standing behind it. Don't move. Don't get closer. Just stand there. Watch. I got back into my car, locked the door, and tried to steady my breathing. When I turned on the engine, the clock on the dashboard was correct .11:13. I screamed in despair. I had turned less than a mile out of the neighborhood when the headlights flickered. Just a flicker, like a reflection from a frosted mirror, but it was enough to slow me down. I looked around. There were no cars ahead, no streetlights, no reflections. I pressed the accelerator to get away from the eerie feeling. The clock read 12:27. But as I drove a few more minutes, just past a familiar billboard, the car's motion sensor lights dimmed briefly and then came back on. And I saw that street. The same dark row of houses, the same motion sensor lights slowly turning on one by one. But that was impossible, I had already left. I was sure I had gone straight, without turning back. I hit the brakes. I opened the map on my phone. The GPS signal circled and then stopped. I was at the same coordinates I left, still Linden Road, still the same intersection with the stop sign broken at one corner. Chills ran down my spine, and I turned around. This time I took a different route. I drove faster, without turning on the radio. But as I crossed the southern highway, I saw something that made my blood stop, red mailbox with the number 408 scrunched in the middle, what I saw, just now. It can't be a coincidence. I immediately stopped the car. Got out, turned around, checked the house number, checked every little detail, and sure enough, it was identical. It was like I was running in a rewound film. Time passed, but everything kept repeating. I tried to remember every turn, every stretch of road. But the more I tried, the more I noticed little details that didn't match. The color of the streetlight seemed to change from time to time, the shape of the utility pole seemed to be bent in a different direction. And then, something worse, I'm not sure how many times I've been home. The phone rang. A text message from his wife. Are you coming home soon? But what left me speechless wasn't the question. It was, the timing of the message, 12:23 a.m., identical to the previous message. I opened the chat. The message, almost done, see you soon, I sent, not there anymore. I gasped. This time, there were no footsteps following, no circle of footprints. But I began to notice something even more terrifying. I can't trust my own memories anymore. I looked through the rearview mirror. Nothing. But a sound came from behind the car, footsteps, very light, then stopped as soon as I turned my head. I drove, unsure of where I was going. The GPS had no signal. The streets passed me as if I had driven them many times before, though the street signs were different each time. Suddenly, a sign that said, Bright Pines Residential, appeared on the side of the road, old and rusty. But I was sure. I had left at least 20 minutes ago. I turned around, determined to take a different direction this time, away from the abandoned urban area. But after only 3 turns, I saw it again. My voice on the radio suddenly stopped, cut off in the middle of the sentence. If the patient stops breathing. Already someone's chuckle echoed, faint as through a faded dream. Not me. I turned and ran, but every step on the loose rocks was heavy as lead, as if some force was holding me back, keeping me in this ravine. As I looked up the slope, my heart sank. My tow truck is gone. No more on the edge of the cliff. No more lights. Nothing left but the night is thicker than before. I yelled, calling out the code into my handheld radio. No signal. No response. Only whisper in the wind, as if the forest were whispering to each other. Talking about me. I started running in the opposite direction, following the ravine. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. But every turn was lead me back to the truck. Unexplainable. I marked the cliff with a UV flashlight, noting the time. But no matter how far I went, I still back to original place, where the cabin is tilted, where the radio constantly plays another version of myself. I'm not sure who I am anymore. I climbed back into the truck cab and, trembling, opened the control panel. I had to try. I pressed the emergency call button and the radio turned on another segment. My voice now read exactly the report I had sent 30 minutes ago, word for word. But I never recorded it. I never turned on this radio. How could it have my memory? Inside the glove compartment, I found a digital voice recorder, a model that had been discontinued for nearly a decade. The screen was still on, the battery was nearly dead, and inside was a recording. I pressed play. 74, late response due to delay at Miller. Driver not on scene. Loop time, 23 minutes 41 seconds. I'm trying, but I think it knows I'm trying. I realize that voice is mine too, but trembling, weak and desperate. Another me. A version before me. Or after me. I turned my head to look out at the canyon. And for the first time, I see something looking back. Not human. Not animal. A figure that seemed to be cut from reality, distorted and wavering like smoke underwater. It had no eyes, but I knew it is learning me, imitate me, from the way my hands shake to my ragged breathing. I suddenly remembered what people said about Miller's Canyon, where time doesn't flow as it should, where the echo returned as a whisper, where mistakes do not end, they recur. And I began to understand. I not the first come down here. I am just one of many copies, stuck in a gap in time and perception, place my past as someone else's present, and the future is something that has been repeated so many times that it has become worn out. The radio blared again. My voice, again, but this time. Progress. Unit 74 is responding. Estimated 12 minutes. From the beginning. I don't know how long I sat in the cabin of the car, my eyes staring into the darkness where the canyon opened like a live cute in the middle of the ground. Every time I tried to stand up, an invisible pressure forced me back down. Not gravity. Not fatigue. But a will. A presence. The wind suddenly fell silent. The forest was as still as if it had held its breath. And then footsteps echoed outside the truck. No rush. No hustle. Slowly. Patient. Like if it knows I won't be able to run anywhere. I jerked the car door open, rushed out, and pointed the flashlight in the direction of the sound. No one. Only muddy footprints remain, inhuman. The toes were long, like fingernails. The heels were short and misaligned, like those of a creature that had once walked on all fours and was now trying to stand on two. I followed that trail until it led me to a deeper slot. Below, a pale blue light shone from a mirror-like still water surface. No wind. No waves. No reflection. I looked down, and for the first time I saw it. My truck, a perfect replica, was down there. And in the cabin, a person sitting, head bowed. I blinked. The person in the car raised his head too. It was me too, but eyes empty like a corpse. And then, a second person appeared beside him. Me too. Then the third person. Fourth person. All are wearing the same rescue suit, bearing the same Unit 74 symbol, and all sat still as stone statues, eyes lifeless. I began to understand. This canyon is not just a place. It is threshold. An open passage between this world and a broken layer of reality, where the dead are not really dead, but captured in their very last moments. A loop. A soul clone. A memory that can't be escaped. I stepped back, but there was no longer stone under my feet. Is water cold? I looked up and realized Iwasi's on the other side, standing in the middle of a distorted replica of Miller Canyon, where there was no wind, no sound of insects, no smell of pine resin. Everything was as drained of life, only left whisperecho from the ground. I turned. My clone stood there, lined up in the dead trees. Don't move. Don't blink. Just look. And behind them, I saw others. Nameless souls, stuck in their final form, a man with half his face burned, a girl still within four strapped to her shoulder, a boy clutching a bloody helmet. Each person a moment separated from time, pulled down here as if the ravine were the umbilical cord, devouring the dead while trying to help others. I tried to scream. But no sound came out. I put my hand up to my face. My mouth is gone. I stood there, in the darkness, listening to the voice that exposed every corner of my life, as if the world around me had disintegrated to make room for the invisible sound that was gnawing at my consciousness. Subject had a dream about drowning in a bathtub at age 6. A buried memory, of unknown origin. Classified as fantasy, but has influenced water-related behavior throughout childhood. I staggered back, my knees weak. It couldn't be. No one knew. It existed only in my mind, a long-buried nightmare. No record. No account. No confession. The subject once kept a jacket that belonged to his deceased father for 3 years without washing it, for fear of losing its scent. This behavior was never mentioned in counseling sessions. No one knew. I blurted out, "How do you know that?" The voice didn't respond. It just continued, coldly, without intonation, as if reading a clinical diagnosis directly from my mind. The accumulated stress that is not released leads to underlying anxiety disorders, which manifest as social avoidance, over-controlling behaviors, and obsessive detail-oriented behavior. The subject is currently in a stage of acute psychological disintegration. I put my fingers in my ears, shouted to drown out the voice, but it still echoed in my head as if it no longer needed a speaker, no longer needed a frequency. It lived inside me. It knew every little corner, every memory I didn't even know I remembered. Subject attempted suicide on February 27, last year. Engine cut off when phone rang. Call from mother. Call not mentioned in any conversation. I hit the ground, shivering. Cold. The air seemed thick. The pressure on my skin was like being buried under meters of earth. I felt myself slipping away from reality, as if the physical world were retreating into another layer of reality, where time was no longer a stream but a frozen reservoir, filled with memories and truths never spoken. Behind me, the radio still didn't emit light. It no longer needed a physical body. It has become the gate. Final stage, subject reaches connection threshold. Prepares for conversion. I whispered, move, where? Where memories never die. Where every last moment lasts forever. Where souls cannot leave until every detail is recorded. All of it. I heard a wind that had no source. A cold wind ran down my spine, but the trees did not stir. I looked up and saw a shadow forming at the edge of the ravine. No definite shape. It looked like my own shadow, but it wasn't me. A version that had been stripped away, completely deciphered. I stood up, staggering back toward the truck, but everything around me had changed. The distance was no longer the same. Every step I took seemed to stretch into infinity. Space stretched. Time slowed. The shadow drew closer, and I suddenly understood, it didn't need to touch me to carry me away. I have been read. Recorded. And there, I will be kept, in an endless record. In the last loop. I backed away from the truck, my chest heaving in the cold air. Cold sweat clung to the back of my shirt, but I couldn't feel my body anymore, like my skin was just an empty shell trying to cling to a fragile existence in a space without rules. Up above, the stars began to vibrate. Not twinkle, but actually vibrate, as if someone was shaking a thin curtain between me and the sky. And then a star fell. But it didn't fall to the ground. It fell into me. I don't know how to describe it, just that the light passed through me like molten metal touching ice, not burning but leaving a scratch in my soul. The car radio blared again. But this time it was no longer a dry report. It was a cry. Someone groaning in pain. A man whispering for help. And a whispering voice. Stuck in the last moment. Don't let it happen again. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. I ran away from the car, from the canyon, from everything. But my feet wouldn't take me any further. Because every road I took, every direction I turned, it led back to mile 15. Not metaphorically. Really. Return. I am stuck. Not in one place. But in one moment. Every time I close my eyes, I see myself lying there, blood streaming from my temples, staring up at the ceiling of the overturned ambulance. My hands gripping the gurney. And I know. I never left that scene. I never got out of the car. I never survived. The radio started up again, no more operator. Other voices now. Multiple voices. Men. Women. Children. Old people. One by one, repeating the last words they said before they died. One called out for his mother. One apologized. One screamed incoherently. All from the same radio. We are stuck here. At the last moment. No one is coming to save us. I screamed, I'm not dead. I'm still here. I'm breathing, I'm alive. But the sound echoed like a forgotten name in a cemetery. No one answered. There was no air. There was no time. There was only that moment, repeating forever, where I think I survived. A hazy white smoke was rising from the ravine. In the mist, I saw figures walking. Not towards, but drift. Souls, twisted, broken, stuck in moments they can't get past. A man who repeatedly slips down a ladder. An old woman who keeps falling onto the kitchen floor. A girl who keeps running but never reaches the door. And I found myself, still sitting in the ambulance, eyes wide open, blood running down my collar, looking up at the radio, never to be able to touch it again. I realized, the only thing keeping me here is Daniel. That I was not dead. That I still have a chance to get out. The last whisper from the radio rang out, gentle as the lullaby of a blind guard at the gates of hell. To leave here, one must remember the last real moment, and accept it. I walked closer to the car. I looked down at my own face in the rearview mirror, pale, eyes empty, mouth slightly open as if about to say something that was left unfinished. I know I have to remember. I have to let it go. I have to die, again. I stepped over the white sheets that covered the silent figures in the attic, my palms still warm from the brass key. The attic floor creaked under my feet, not just from my weight, but as if the wood responded to my presence. There was a whistling sound through the small holes in the roof, but it didn't seem to be coming from outside. It was coming from inside the walls. When I pulled back one of the sheets, what lay beneath was not furniture. It was a mirror about 5 feet tall, framed in carved walnut, dusty but unbroken. The glass did not reflect me, instead, it reflected the room, yes, but in a different state. The furniture was out of place, the boxes were gone, replaced by indistinct objects, hazy as if through a haze. And in the glass, far away, there was a person standing watching me from a dark corner, near the window. I spun around. No one was there. But the figure in the mirror was still there. Not moving, not leaving, just standing and watching. A slow, long, cold breath slid down my spine. I reached out to touch the glass when I felt a current run through my fingertips, making me step back. The atmosphere in the attic began to change. The air became thick, as if the space were being compressed. Whispers rose from all sides, no words, just feelings. The feeling of being watched, read, called out without a word. I backed toward the stairs and heard footsteps below. Soft. Regular. As if someone had just entered the house. I paused at the top of the stairs, looking down into the darkness below. But the darkness no longer seemed like what I had known. It had become deeper. Like a curtain was being drawn back, inviting me to look into something the light had never touched. I turned, intending to return to the mirror, and saw that it now reflected the attic room as it was now. But I was not there. I am no longer in reflection. Instead, there was a door. A door that didn't exist in this reality, a dark wooden door, with a tarnished brass handle, set in the place where the brick wall was empty. When I turned toward that wall, that door appeared, too, as if I had opened a junction. I don't remember getting close. But my hand was on the knob now. It was hot. Not because of the temperature, but because it felt like the knob held memories, and they weren't mine. The moment I touched it, fragments of memories flashed through my mind like electric shocks. A man falling down a flight of stairs, a child lost in an empty house, a woman standing before a mirror, repeating the same phrase over and over again. I'm still here. I'm still here. I open the door. The back is not a room. Not an attic. Not this world. It was a long hallway with no end. The light was pale, blue-gray, with no apparent source, as if everything were illuminated by a moon that didn't exist. Doors were closed on either side, each bearing a strange symbol engraved into it. I could hear the ticking of a clock, but I couldn't see where it was. And inside me, a sound rose, not from my ears but from deep within my chest. This is where they come when they can't leave. The voice is not mine. But it is inside me. I started walking. I walked towards the dressing table covered with a cloth, each step echoing quietly in the dark and dusty space of the attic. When I pulled the white cloth back, a thick layer of dust rose up, as if I had disturbed a long-buried memory. The oval mirror on the table reflected the faint light from the window, but I was not in it. I blinked, once, twice. Nothing changed. The mirror showed no reflection of me, just an empty attic, a void of people. But behind me, in the mirror, was the silhouette of a woman. Unmoving. Faceless. Standing there. Looking at me. I turned around. No one. The wind blew through the attic window, making a soft whistling sound, like someone whispering without words. I turned to look at the mirror, and this time, the woman was closer. Her face was still hidden in shadow, but her long white hair and old-fashioned lace dress made me shiver. It seemed like the air around me was starting to thicken, colder, thicker. I retreated, but I could no longer hear my footsteps. The attic seemed to have swallowed the sound. I turned and ran down the attic stairs, but stopped after only a few steps. Instead of the third-floor hallway, I saw the same attic. The same white curtains. The same mirror. The same silhouette of the woman now standing close to the mirror. I don't understand. I turned and ran, I remember it clearly, but the attic repeated itself. I tried again, tried to open the door, ran down, but every time it was the same, I was back where I started. It was as if space was folding around me. A loop. A subtle but cruel trap. The woman in the mirror began to move, not walk, but slide forward, as if pulled by something invisible. I heard a voice. Small. Like wind through a crack in the door. You're in the house. Now, you have to remember. I backed up against the wall, my heart pounding, trying to contain my gasp. The mirror no longer reflected the attic, it showed me a bedroom. A winter night. A little girl was standing on the edge of the bed, looking down at someone lying motionless. Her hands were shaking, her cheeks wet with tears. Do you know that person? The woman's voice whispered again, echoing from many directions. I shook my head. But deep down, I felt familiar. Memories began to flood back like a storm, tearing apart everything I had buried deep. I had been to this house before. Only once, when I was very young. A death. An accident no one spoke of. A woman I remembered only by her scent, ozone, and old wood. I turned back to look in the mirror, and this time, I saw myself, as a child, standing in the bedroom. I didn't know if I was looking into the mirror, or looking back at myself through the eyes of a soul that had never left this place. The voice rang out again, clearer, closer. You were here first. And you forgot. Now it's your turn to stay, to remember for us. A gust of wind blew the white curtains covering the chair apart. The attic faded away, dissipating like smoke. Then I was no longer standing there. I was sitting, silent, in front of the mirror. Outside, the sky was gray as if frozen in time. The house was absolutely silent, as if every sound, every movement, every life, had been imprisoned with me. I don't know who I am anymore. All I know is that tomorrow night, at exactly 11:47, someone new will arrive. And I have to teach them how to remember. I sat motionless in front of the mirror, as if I had done it 100 times. The wind was no longer blowing. The footsteps from below had long since ceased. The attic was in a frozen moment of reality, where time was no longer a flow but a stagnant, silent pool, reflecting itself in a distorted way. But this time, there was something different. A very faint sound rang out, not like wind or creaking wood, but rather, electricity. Buzzing. Very faint. Like the static from some device trying to catch a signal from afar. I raised my head. The opposite wall began to shake slightly. A faint blue light gradually spread out from the crack at the base of the wall, something I had never seen before, despite going through dozens of similar loops. I stood up, my heart pounding. The light was flickering, like a pulse. And as I got closer, I realized it wasn't light, it was a projection. It was as if an old video was being played on the wall by a broken projector. A blurry image appears, a black and white surveillance camera is recording this very attic. I'm not in it, but there is a shadow glided across, then disappeared through a wall door that never existed on the map of the house. I stepped closer. The light flickered one last time, then the wall fell into small pieces like burning paper, revealing a short hallway, leading into darkness. No choice. I walked in. The hallway was only about 5 paces long, but with each step I felt like I was being pulled away from myself. The whispers around me shattered into cries, laughter, screams, hundreds of voices overlapping each other, unable to distinguish between truth and falsehood. At the end of the corridor Issa read, "Rusty iron door, with a faded bronze sign. The last moment, keep/delete." I touched the handle. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from. I didn't know what I wanted. If I held on to the memories, I would be trapped. If I erased them, I could escape, but that would mean everything I had ever been, known, loved, would be gone forever. I opened the door. Behind was a white, sterile room, as large as a morgue but with no beds, just hundreds of memory boxes suspended in the air, slowly rotating like satellites around a central blind spot. Each box contains a final moment, the eyes of a dying person, the sighs of a regretful person, the last words left unsaid. And I realized, I am not the first one here. I am just one of many who have passed through the loop, held as witnesses, or archivists. Suddenly, one black box slowly drifted towards me. No label. No markings. But I knew it was mine. My hand automatically reached out and opened the lid. Inside, a rusty key and a piece of burnt paper. Only mistakes can ruin what is perfect. And you are that mistake. The moment I touched the key, reality cracked, not by sound, but by absolute silence. The wind stopped. The whispering stopped. Every loop, shattered like glass. I come back, saw that the hallway behind was now dark. But light from outside, real light, was shining through a crack in the open door. For the first time after so many repeated lives, I was able to choose the exit. I no longer know who I am. But this time, I know this clearly, I have stepped into something no one is allowed to know. The light shining through the crack in the door grew brighter. It wasn't natural light. There was no sun emitting this light. It was like a beam of light coming from outside, my brain. I stepped through. It didn't feel like going in, it felt like sucked in. I opened my eyes in a small room with yellowed rose wallpaper and the smell of old milk powder and detergent. A baby's cry could be heard from somewhere, but there was no child in the room. I bent down, saw me hand wearing wedding ring. A female voice rang out from behind. "Have you made the milk yet? The baby is hungry." I turned around. A woman in a thin robe was standing at the door, her eyes worried and tired. I didn't know who she was. But a name popped into my head, Julia. I said nothing, just stood there. She frowned. "Again? Why are you so absent-minded lately? Don't tell me you dreamed about it again." I wanted to ask again. But my mouth said something completely different, "Not in my opinion. I'll go buy more diapers. Don't worry." I turned and walked away. It wasn't me who was in control. I just reside inside someone. The scene blurred. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, I was standing in front of a deserted country road. It just rained, the ground was muddy. In front of me was a boy about 10 years old, with deep black eyes, looking straight at me. "Do you remember me?" I shook my head. But my hand was grabbed, the pistol hidden in his coat pocket. A voice rang out in my head, not mine. "It has seen too much. It cannot go back." I tried to resist, but my hand wouldn't listen. The barrel of the gun rose. I screamed in my heart. But the gunshots kept ringing. The memory faded. I collapsed, gasping for air. The ground beneath me was now wooden floor of a theater, the stage lights are shining down. A young girl in a dancing dress was spinning, spinning, spinning endlessly. Her legs were bleeding, but her face still held a smile. Behind the stage, I, or another version of me, is pulling the strings. I shouted. "Stop." No one listened. The girl turned and broke her ankle. Fell. But her jaw remained fixed in a forced smile. A cracking sound rang out in my head. I woke up again in a white room. But now, the moving memory bush in a different order. No longer drifting, but shoot past like a shooting star. Every time it passes my head it drags me along a name, a face, a mistake. I realized, this ice abandoned memories, the forgotten or deliberately hidden lives. Reality cannot erase them, so it compresses them into the deepest layer, and whoever goes too far, becomes container. I became that thing. I began to forget my name. I even forgot why I came here. But there was one thing that kept me here. A familiar melody rang out from afar, the song my wife used to listen to every afternoon in our old apartment. I never told anyone about it. It was the only thing that belonged to me. I followed the sound. With every step, I fought off countless other memories that tried to hook me like hooks. A drowned child. A hit-and-run accident. A rejected proposal. Pushing someone off a cliff. I'm not those people, I am me. And finally, I come to a room with squeaky closet door. I opened it. Inside there was only a picture frame, me and my wife, on a picnic, in a windy field. I touched it. Strange memories disappear. The white room melted into the light. A voice rang out. If you still remember who you are, it's not too late. I opened my eyes and found myself laying on the old floor in the abandoned apartment. The clock showed 11:14 p.m. 1 minute later everything repeated itself. I got over it. But what I brought with me was no longer the pure me.